Greetings and welcome to Genre Grinder. I'm your host Gabe, and with me is returning guest and my friend, and the only man with a Polish last name that I know how to correctly pronounce, Jim Laczkowski. Say hi, Jim.
I know how to pronounce your last name. It's Powers, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Good to be back. And we're tackling a particular subgenre from a country I happen to love and sometimes think I should probably be living there instead of here.
Yeah, you may feel a chill on the air and smell a sickly sweet odor of maple syrup on the wind. That's because we're looking at Canadian exploitation movies, or more amusingly known as Canuxploitation movies. And this was Jim's idea.
Yeah. I mean, I got a big plate of poutine here and some Tim Hortons coffee ready to go.
Well, I mean, it lines up well because it's the NHL finals, and Edmonton's in the finals, so there's actually a Canadian team in the finals this year. I guess there was last year too, but anyway. And then Christine and I are actually taking a road trip up to Montreal that we've been planning forever, that she's going to go see a Formula One practice, and we're going to visit with some friends out there. And we're actually leaving 2 days after we record this. So if you're listening to this and it's the first part of June, that means I was able to get the edit finished before we left. If it's the latter part of June, I couldn't finish it in time, and I apologize.
Yeah, I know, cut it close to the wire here, but yeah, busy times. This is one of the busier months I've had, so it's a lot. But I mean, I will probably in the future think of this as a very special episode to be on for, because after living in the same place for 6 years, this is the first podcast I'm recording in my lovely new home with my fiance Sharon, and feel a sense of peace, and it already feels like home, even if there are still boxes everywhere. There's still plenty to rearrange and turn into a home together. But it's just nice. And it was, hey, the first movie we watched together after moving in was Pin. Can you imagine a more romantic movie to watch together?
Beautifully. Well, okay, that's well, yeah, and I guess that's just a good way of saying that Jim was really busy, and I was busy prepping for this, and Jim's a little under the weather today, so excuse him if he gets a little coffee or something. Yeah. I think it's the smoke from Canada, ironically enough, that was fucking us up here in Minnesota, so I bet it's the same fire smoke.
It could be, yeah.
Canuxploitation is one of those broad subjects that crosses genres. For instance, there is a load of the classic early 80s era slasher movies that were made in Canada, sometimes by American filmmakers, and with American actors, but they were definitely Canadian films. But we have a pretty good grasp on what we mean when we say the phrase Canuxploitation, thanks to some books and documentaries on the subject.
I recommend They Came From Within.
Yes, that was the next, Callum Van Stal's. They Came From Within, the history of Canadian horror cinema. And then there's a documentary called Nightmare in Canada. It's kind of a short that includes him. It was, I think, sort of based on his book. They kind of made this this hour-long documentary based on that. And those start off talking about Julian Rothman's The Mask, which was a 3D movie from 1961. And then Donald R. Passmore's The Corpse Eaters, as sort of the movies that kind of kicked off the idea of Canuxploitation, even though there was Canadian movies before that. We're not going to cover those two. And a few more kind of integral titles that we're not going to include are Ivan Reitman's Cannibal Girls. That's right, the director of Ghostbusters made Trash. And Dodd Edmonds' Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS, which was co-produced by Ivan Reitman. But I think most people think the two most important directors are Bob Clark, who's actually an American who went to Canada, and David Cronenberg. And I just sort of made a decision to not cover any Cronenberg films, not because I don't think they count, but just because I think that Cronenberg is such a popular subject for podcasts and critical things that I don't know if we would have anything particularly interesting to bring to the table. I would have picked Bob Clark's Death Dream, but we've actually talked about it 3 times. Like the first ever episode of Genre Grinder, we brought it up, and then Bill Ackerman and I covered it on one of our sort of underground 70s episodes, and then Patrick brought it to the scariest movie scenes podcast, and so we talked about it again there.
Well, rightfully so. That's probably, I don't know, it would be in my top 10
Well,
Canadian
yeah,
films.
I think it's the best Bob Clark movie.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I agree.
but we will be covering a movie made by his frequent collaborators, which is called Deranged. And I picked 4 films and sort of ran them by Jim. But if you think these are bad picks, it's really my fault. Basically, I wanted to pick movies that weren't super obscure because we
Hmm.
could have, but I also didn't want to pick the most obvious ones.
Yeah, because of course my my instinct was to go right to the gate because that's was literally my gateway into horror movies. And
Yeah,
I kind of, part of me is like, yeah, but I think most people know that one. It's probably been talked about a lot at this point. And yeah, again, like it's pretty straightforward. I don't know how, deep in depth you can get with that movie. It's just fun. It's just a fun, like,
I
almost
would
like,
argue that the gate doesn't have a specifically Canadian flavor to it too, which
nah,
isn't
nah, not really.
necessarily a prerequisite, but there are a couple movies. I'm on Letterboxd right now looking. There are a couple movies that they're the slashers, Terror Train, My Bloody
Hmm.
Valentine, Happy Birthday to Me, those, and Black Christmas, of course.
Yeah.
But then there are movies like Spasms, which just feels like it's just a killer snake movie, uh, and the movie Kathy's Curse is one that I didn't even know was Canadian.
Oh yeah. Wow. That's
Yeah,
right. Yeah, no, I found a list on Canuxploitation.com
yeah,
too.
that's the big source.
Yeah, yeah, and I was like, wow, there are some titles on here that I'm very curious about based on the titles alone, like Sweet Prudence and the Erotic Adventures of Bigfoot. But
Yeah.
that's like 2011 apparently. But still, there's some, yeah, there's some whoppers on here. I'm just like, wow.
Well, one I did almost cover was Things, but it's so ridiculous and weird. And then I think, because Patrick and I did the shot on video episodes, I was thinking at some point I want to do a shot on 8mm horror episode.
Ooh.
And so I kind of pushed that over there. So,
Yeah, and the Silent Partner. I don't know. Like I didn't think of that as a exploitation movie. I mean, it's a thriller, and
mhm.
but like parts of it are, like some of the kills in that are very giallo like. But
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever seen that one. Does it like have a lot of nudity in it? Is that what it?
yeah, yeah, there is that. But it's really just like a like almost like a heist thriller with Elliot Gould and Christopher Plummer.
Okay.
It's just really, really intense at times. It's just, weirdly enough, John Candy plays one of the bank tellers in it. It's so Canadian though.
Yeah,
I just,
yeah. Well, John Candy was Canadian, wasn't he? Or was he
yeah.
from? Yeah,
Oh
I
yeah,
thought
for
so. I
sure.
couldn't remember if he was from Chicago or Canada. Well, I guess another thing I did here is I tried to mostly pick horror movies because there's
Sure.
plenty of softcore pornography. Like
Yeah, and
just when you
sex
say,
comedies and
yeah,
yeah.
Ozploitation, like probably half of all Ozploitation is sex comedies, and if we ever did an Ozploitation episode, I probably wouldn't cover any of those.
Well, that would be my pick for next year.
Yeah,
To be
maybe.
honest, it's funny because, like, I don't know. I was trying to think, even watching that short documentary. I mean, I'm sure they brought up what makes these so specific to Canadian film, and but like
Yeah.
I mean, like there's a lot of focus on just landscapes and the vastness of open terrain in a lot of Canadian films. That does remind me of exploitation. Like
Hmm.
something like Wake and Fright would make a great double feature with Rituals.
Yeah.
So like there's things that I could, like, there's correlations between them that I can see. I just, most of the time, if I were to say, well, what makes Conexploitation Conexploitation so distinctive, it's hard for me to pin down.
And a lot of them try to disguise themselves as B Hollywood movies.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
they will go out of their way to disguise the fact that they take place in Canada. Well let's get in. So we're gonna get it started with Deranged, which is another starting point for a lot of these books. This came out in 1974. The alternate longer title is Deranged: Confessions of a Necrophile.
Mm.
Uh, this this is one of many sad serial killer movies that were born out of Hitchcock's Psycho, and it's even based on the same real world supposed serial killer Ed Gein.
Mhm.
I say supposed because not a lot of proof of what he did, but Gein was a Wisconsin-based murderer whose crimes were so shocking and bizarre that they kind of became legendary. And the actual crimes were more tied to grave robbing and making gruesome decorations and clothing from dead bodies that he didn't kill. He just body snatched. But his legend portrays him as a necrophile, and I don't believe we have any proof of that, and as a mass murderer, but he was only convicted of killing one person. So a lot of what goes into him is legend.
Yeah.
He might have just been a really disturbed guy who killed one person, which, you know, is bad enough. But Psycho was the first motion picture or book inspired by his antics, and that was followed by this movie, Three on a Meat Hook, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is it's
Came
sort
out the
of
same year, right?
same year, a little bit later than this,
Hmm.
just barely. I think on a Meat Hook also came. It was sort of like
Wow.
1973, 74 were the year for it. And then Silence of the Lambs, which takes the whole lady suit concept, which is something that he did do that we do know.
Mm.
He stitched a sort of bodysuit. And then basically every Rob Zombie movie has a sort of Ed Gein vibe to it.
Yeah, I've always just thought of him as like, yeah, he's just ripping off Texas Chainsaw Massacre
Right,
1 and 2, mostly
right.
2.
He's just adding Ed Gein variants and Charlie Manson variants to
Yeah,
everything.
yeah. But
At,
I found this one to be pretty striking. I mean, like, I was kind of taken aback a little bit by the narrator who appears on screen.
well, yeah, and that's actually one of the interesting things is that in a lot of ways this isn't a horror movie. It's a movie where horrifying things happen,
Yeah.
but it's sort of treated like, actually what I'll do, I'll say, so the idea here came from a concert promoter, an American concert promoter named Tom Carr, who had been obsessed with the Gein story, and he went to Alan Ormsby and Jeff Gillen, who were both Ormsby is actually in the movie Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. He's the sort of leader of the hippies who's an asshole.
Yeah, that was his first collaboration with Bob Clark.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think, and then I think he's also the Santa Claus in Christmas Story.
Oh.
It's either him, it's one of these two guys, and I can't remember which one. It's either him or Jeff Gillen. But they were sort of hired because Tom Carr had seen those Bob Clark movies and was impressed. And they're all Americans, I should say. Clark, Ormsby, and Gillen are all Americans, and so is producer Tom Carr. The knowing that this was sort of a for hire project kind of makes it more interesting to me,
Hmm.
because it sort of exists in this thing that we don't see anymore, where you hire somebody like a hired gun, you tell them to be able to do something, but you're willing to let them do it their way, is
Yeah.
super uncommon because it's a very idiosyncratic movie, unlike Three on a Meat Hook, which is just what you would expect a B junker to be about, or Chainsaw Massacre, which is all about visceral terror. This is more what you expect from these guys.
Yeah. No, Ormsby has a really interesting career as a writer. Like he's kind of like I had no idea he wrote, My Bodyguard, or
Yeah,
a movie I saw in the theater that's not too good, but it was Noble Attempt, but like Popcorn.
yeah,
I really
it
I
has a
wish I
big
liked that
following.
movie more.
No,
But yeah,
I kind of agree with you.
yeah, it's just
I'm not the
interesting.
hugest fan, but yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah.
The adaptation here is much closer to the actual events that
Hmm.
of the Ed Gein murders, but it's still mostly made up. But yes, the what you're saying, there's a narrator, and so it's set up almost like a newscast on the subject
Yeah.
after they have captured the guy, which makes it almost a mockumentary. Like, if you use your imagination, it's sort of a mockumentary, but it feels more. And then the newscaster will pop up again as a narrator, like almost like he's the Greek chorus. Like, and there's a lot about all of Ormsby and several of Clark's movies that feel like stage plays to me, and this one is in particular. I feel like Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things is almost a stage play,
Yeah.
and a lot of Death Dream feels like a stage play.
Or like a Cassavetes movie.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think you could.
Especially with the actor who plays the dad. His name
Right,
escapes me, but
actual
yeah.
cast. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think you could pull that. I'd say that about Black Christmas has too many locations and too much camera movement, but so it's like halfway between a filmed play, and I think you could just turn this screenplay into a play,
Hmm. Yeah.
and it might actually be kind of good because you don't need a lot of people or locations.
Yeah, it was
Or
interesting. I mean, it's like you're talking about it's like a film play with like a docudrama, but it's still horrific, and it's so crazy. Like, it would be a little jarring to, see something, awful happening, and then suddenly the narrator's like sitting by the bedside after the
Yeah.
mother dies or something, and you're just like, it's kind of funny
Well,
just
I
that
do
he's
think
there.
I definitely it's called a black comedy on a lot of things, and I think it is a black comedy.
Yeah.
I think that we are supposed to find it sort of ridiculous, but it's not a satire or a spoof.
Right.
It's like it's so everything about it is so matter of fact that it doesn't feel like a horror movie until and then something really nasty will happen. And it almost makes it scarier, I suppose. Like I can imagine that really in 1974 that really throwing off audiences.
Yeah, and I mean, it still amazes me, because I knew the name. I obviously, Robert's Blossom was the lead in this, and
Mhm.
of course, my mind immediately goes to the Home Alone,
Yeah,
and
he's the scary homeless guy who turns out to be a nice person.
yeah, and it's
And it's
just
so
so
funny.
weird.
There's like 20 years between those two movies, and he looks exactly the same.
I know.
It's like
It's
he
so
was
weird.
born 55.
Yeah, but, like, his performance is so compelling, it's so haunting, and, like, you just feel for him, like, he's sort of capturing, like, this, this man that's driven to madness by this, by the fact that he's lived only with this domineering mother and now experiencing isolation, and it's kind of unexpected whenever that happens for me, when I'm like, I kind of feel sad for this guy, even
Mhm.
though he's deranged, but still,
Well, and
you.
that's the Anthony Perkins kind
Mhm.
of. That's why Psycho's so good.
Yeah.
It's not. It's good because it's well made and it's interesting. It was unique for its era, but it's also good because it's so hard to pull off a sympathetic serial killer. And everybody's tried to do it since, and I don't know if anybody's ever done it as well as Hitchcock did in Psycho.
Yeah, and I mean, there's certain, like, it's. I mean, I will say that it's kind of. I wouldn't say ordinary or plain in the way it's filmed, but some moments will stand out, like that rotating like 180 shot that's in his room when he's lying in bed.
Hmm.
That, at first I'm like, well, why are you kind of just spinning around the room? But I mean, it makes sense. It's like capturing not just, to see how he lives and is neglectful of his surroundings and kind of incapable of self care. But then the reveal, because at first you hear the mother's voice, and it's not seen, it's just heard, and then the camera will go back to him lying on the bed, and you see that he's imitating his mother, a la
Hmm.
Psycho, simply because he doesn't know what life is like without her, that he's just becoming her in a way. So it's, yeah, that whole shot was like, okay, I mean, I thought it was like kind of, gimmicky at first to do that, but then it made sense once you got to the, like, what it ultimately led up to.
The Psycho part also makes me think that a one way to describe this as someone who hadn't seen it, as if Psycho came out and then somebody released a B movie called Psycho: The True Story.
Hmm.
This kind of feels like what that would have been like.
Yeah.
Movie would have come, but it didn't because I don't think it was very well known that Ed Gein was the inspiration behind Psycho.
No,
I
no,
think,
definitely not at the time.
yeah, I think the people in the know knew it, but I don't think it was like part of public record. Whereas something like Chainsaw Massacre, Norman Bates does have all the stuff, and he does stuff as mom. But then you have something like this and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and to a certain degree, Silence of the Lambs, where the disgusting decorative element is actually like 80% of the horror.
I was really surprised at how much it became Texas Chainsaw Massacre, to where literally there's, a woman held captive that sits at the dinner table
At a
with
dinner
all the
table. Yeah.
with all the corpses. I'm like, is she gonna start screaming? And like, I mean, it was so. I mean, did the filmmakers like converse with one another, or did, like, once Toby Hooper saw this, did they go, "Whoa, this is way too close to what we
Yeah.
were doing"?
Yeah, and I mean the only real difference is it's not the last scene in the movie. It's like the
Right.
second to last scene in the movie, and she
Yeah.
doesn't escape. But then there is another scene with riding in the backs of pickup trucks after that too. So yeah, there are
Mm,
some very strange connections that I think were just coincidences.
yeah.
I think that someone just could that more than one writer could not help themselves with the idea that that Geen had all these bodies in his house, and they must have been at the dinner table. because it seems like loneliness was the thing that drove him the most, so he would want to talk to them.
Yeah, no,
You know.
exactly. And it's also just really kind of heartbreaking too
Hmm.
with the girl that's in the hardware store, right? And like
Hmm.
the fact that like her boyfriend and his father set up this, the trap, the bear trap, I guess, in the woods or whatever, or the animal trap. And when she gets caught in that, I'm just like, oh god, and the fact that if maybe she would have gotten away if it wasn't for that trap. I think that I really got invested in like the outcome of everything, and certainly I can't even imagine the reveal like towards the end too, with her body just hanging there, and like the boyfriend and the father having to see that. And
Hmm.
yeah, this one really snuck up on me, even though I'm like, again, the story is so familiar. I've seen it
Yeah.
done masterfully well in two other great movies, but Robert's Blossom, and just scene to scene, I still got wrapped up in everything. There's, I mean, that's and there's also just like weird, unexpected moments like that seance scene with the old family friend
Hmm.
who apparently the mother trusted because she was fat, which
Yeah.
I didn't understand that
Yeah.
necessarily. But yeah, like obviously once she tries to seduce him, I knew what was going to happen. But still, that whole sequence was just like really bizarre.
Well, this movie was a little bit of a legend among like the Fangoria crowd and the very, very early internet fandom crowd, specifically because it was, well, two reasons. One, it was almost a lost movie at a certain point. It sort of was re-released. AIP put it out on video in 1994, and that was its first
Hmm.
real home video release. And
Wow.
so now we're right on the cusp of DVD, and home video is becoming a more important thing to all this stuff. So like we're right at the edge of the internet or fandom, and we're right on the cusp of DVD. So I remember being very aware of it. And then it's also Tom Savini's first screen credit as the special effects. He co did the special effects with Ormsby and Jerome Bergson. I think they overlapped the work between this and Death Dream. I believe the two movies were being made basically at the same time, so
Mhm.
Savini would have been going between the two of them. But Savini would not have been. He hadn't done Martin, or he would do Martin the next year, I believe, and then he would do Dawn of the Dead. And after Dawn of the Dead, Tom Savini became like the name Tom
Yeah,
Savini.
no kidding. It's interesting though, and I need to ask you this because I believe we just might have rented this on Amazon or something. I can't remember how we saw it, but there is, I mean, I was doing some reading, and apparently there is a scene that would, I mean, God, I mean, obviously Tom Savini would have brought his A game for this. We did not see this particular scene. Is and I'm guessing you must have seen this. The scene where he's unscooping brains and eyeballs.
Yeah, no, the brain. Yeah, that's in the version I watched.
Oh, weird. Because
It's
we,
really
I
early
had
in
to
the
go ask
movie.
Sharon. I'm like, did I miss something entirely? Because I would have remembered this. And
It happens very early in the movie, and it's not a particularly long scene.
weird.
So
Okay.
I think we watched the same one, and it might have just kind of gone past you because it's not. But
Hmm.
yeah, I believe that and that then there is because when it was released on home video at first, it was edited down to avoid an R rating.
Maybe I don't
Um,
know. Maybe that's the version we saw. I don't know. I'm curious now to find out.
yeah,
If
it was that scene, and then there's a scene where the woman who we were talking about earlier, she gets beaten more times, I believe,
huh,
on the
on the
uh
bed.
no, yeah, the woman who is just trying to escape during the dinner
Oh,
scene.
okay. Yeah,
She's
yeah, yeah.
clobbered more times, I believe. The thing about the gore in this is it's actually more gross than like you're prepared for. Like when Ezra is the character's name, when his mom dies, he's trying to feed her pea soup,
Ugh.
and it just starts coming out her nose with blood,
Blood.
and
Yeah.
it's
Ugh.
like the custard scene from Brain Dead. It's that gross. And it just
Yeah,
sort
I
of
know.
comes out of nowhere, and they really make it work because the effects aren't the most realistic things, but they do stuff like all the blood looks kind of like mud, which is it would if these bodies had been in the earth forever and probably embalmed on
Mm.
top of that, and it's just like it's icky.
It's definitely a movie you want to take a shower afterwards. It's really nasty. And I mean, and at the same time, like we're talking about still subtle in that it's not necessarily like a consistently gory slasher movie.
No.
It's more it's a lot more reserved in a way that's almost like a character study and a docudrama, and just
Yeah.
kind of like, oh, okay. I mean, similar to like, Death Dream being not like your typical zombie movie. It's a kind of a hybrid,
Hmm.
and a really interesting one, because uh even if it gets like melodramatic or intense with the parents in that film, you're still caring about everything taking place, and that's really really kind of a feat in of itself. I always go back to like, oh shit, I am so moved by the end of May,
Hmm.
and when that happens, because I don't know, most of the time horror movies, I don't know if I go to them for, oh, I want to feel an
Yeah.
emotional connection to what's taking place. A lot of times I just want to have fun and kick back and enjoy myself, or at least get scared and treat it like a roller coaster. But every once in a while, a movie like this, I'll just go, oh, this is kind of sad at the
Yeah.
same time.
There's a new, I believe, 4K version from Vinegar Syndrome that I maybe would have bought before we did this, but I just didn't
Ooh.
get around to it. The one thing I noticed this time that I'm wondering if I couldn't find any other information on it, but I noticed a lot of characters. It really sounds like they refer to him as Ed
Hmm.
when his name, and then there's other scenes where they'll say Ezra, and so I was trying to decide if they're trying to say Ez
Yeah, I think it. I'm pretty
or
sure
if,
as.
but then my other theory is that they were saying Ed and there was some sort of legal ramification to implying that this character was named Ed Gein, so
Mm,
they sort of, you know, shot more scenes where they said Ezra and to imply that they're saying Ez instead of Ed, but it really sounds like they're saying Ed to me in certain scenes, but I'm sure that's something that would be covered on the extras in the new release, but I was not able to see it.
yeah, I think Arrow might have put out a release of this as well at some point.
Yeah, not too long ago, and there was a
Yeah.
Kino one.
No, it's quite good. I recommend it. I mean, I again, like, I'm more curious to explore like what other films Ormsby has done, just because of my love of Death Dream and everything. But
Mhm.
was this the only one he directed or
Yes,
co-directed?
I
Yeah,
believe this is the only directing.
yeah,
I mean, I'm sure there was other stuff he did on those movies where he was working
hmm, yeah,
with Clark, but he never got a credit. Like it
yeah.
seems really likely that he was co-directing Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things as being the writer and one of the main actors. It just
It,
seems likely that he would.
apparently on IMDb it says that he made a movie 2 years after this called The Great Masquerade. I have never heard of this, but
Mm-mm.
apparently Robert's Blossom is in it.
Oh, okay.
Weird.
Maybe they made it at the same time and they just didn't release it for 2 years.
Yeah, that's possible. I'd be
It kind of
curious.
seems like that was part of like the Bob Clark model, was to, like, all these movies were made kind of on top of each other, came
Yeah.
out really close to each other, including Black Christmas.
This doesn't sound like a horror movie too, so I don't I don't know what to make of this one, but all right, let's move on.
Yeah, so then the next one, so that, yeah, Deranged is like, it's like a proto slasher, we could call it, and it's like a it has elements of that. So part of the fun of this particular podcast is I'm kind of sneak peeking other possible episodes of Genre Grinder because we're picking these specific movies. So the next one is Rituals from 1977, which is known as The Creeper on some releases. I don't think either of those are particularly good titles for this movie, but Rituals is definitely a better one. Because
um
the Creeper is almost a spoiler, which I guess we're going to spoil stuff about it. The Creeper implies that there is only one killer, which there is, but throughout the movie, it's sort of implied there might be more than one guy. And so I much prefer Rituals as a title.
I do too, and I think maybe at some point down the road you will do a genre render episode on backwoods horror, right?
Well, so specific. You're getting ahead of me, Jim.
I
let
figured.
me let me lay out. This is directed by a British Canadian filmmaker Peter Carter, who mostly worked in television, which is something that's going to come up again later. Television working. He made a Peter Fonda trucker movie called Highballin'. He made
Hmm.
a Jack London adaptation called Klondike Fever, which seems to be a sort of PG companion piece to this movie from its description. And he made a movie called High Point, a CIA comedy that had Beverly D'Angelo, Richard Harris, and Christopher Plummer.
Oh
So
wow.
he made some pretty big releases outside of Canada. This is sort of the low budget Canadian version of Deliverance.
Indeed.
And I've always been really, well, I shouldn't say always, ever since I saw Deliverance, I've been really into the idea of Deliverance alike movies. And it's like a certain kind of survival horror, backwoods horror thing. But there's just something about the part that Deliverance brings to it is that it's not just like campers, which is, part of it, but it's like a group of men trying to find themselves. So Deliverance has a group of men go into the wilderness to reconnect with nature and their sense of manhood, and then they find themselves locked in this mortal battle with local hillbillies. And then there's this movie where they go to the Canadian doctors this time, go to the Canadian wilderness, and they also come across, well, they think it's crazed hillbillies, but it's actually a someone with very severe post-traumatic stress from World War II,
Right.
who has, so it's a little less of a crazy hillbilly and more of a not David Koresh. What was the name of the Unabomber? Whatever the Unabomber's name was.
I
I
was gonna
can't.
say David Caruso, but that's not right either. I
No,
thought it was. I thought it was Koresh.
Krasinski.
Oh, Kaczynski.
Ted
Right. Ted
Kaczynski.
Kaczynski. Yes. 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 Yes.
Another Polish name I know how to pronounce, I
Oh, good.
guess. um, but then there's a couple other movies that, like, if I ever do this, like, we've already covered Ritual, so we can't cover it again. But there's a movie called Southern
Southern
Comfort,
Comfort.
which
Yes.
is, I think, my favorite. What's his name movie?
Walter Hill.
Walter Hill movie,
Yeah.
which is sort of the Vietnam version of this idea.
Mm-hmm.
It has definitely a war slant, and it's Cajuns instead of hillbillies. And there's a 1988 movie called Brother in Arms, and an
Huh.
'86 movie called Hunter's Blood. Those two are trash, but they are the same thing. They are definitive Deliverance ripoffs that came out quite later down. And I think the movie, if we're going to be able to include any slasher, it would be Just Before Dawn. Feels like it fits this,
Mm-hmm.
which
Yeah.
is one of my all-time favorite movies.
Would you
Um,
say like? I mean, I guess no. Like things like surviving the game, or like those are more what you call it. That's like the Hunger Games, or not the Hunger Games.
right,
But you know what?
they're death game
Yeah.
movies.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's the one, there's The Edge, the one
Oh
where
yeah, with the bear.
Alec Baldwin and Anthony Hopkins are running away from a bear, and that's a case where it's still kind of the same thing. I think that, like, if you had a pie graph or a flow chart, you could have a
Hmm.
flow chart like when you see the flow charts of animal genuses and how they split and stuff like that. You could do that with this kind of horror movie.
Yeah, I guess those other ones I was thinking of was like the Most Dangerous Game kind of scenarios where they're,
Yeah.
it's like all set up and they're all trying to outrun people. Like it's just, I don't know. Yeah, I guess I kind of have an affinity for that too.
Well, and there's something about being hunted by
Yeah,
humans and being
exactly.
just not prepared for it. I think the metaphor, not even the metaphor, but the theme of Rituals and Deliverance are closer than the themes to any of these other movies. Because, like, Southern Comfort, the theme is, look, where it's Vietnam, but in the bayou, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there'll be movies like Don't Go in the Woods Alone, which is, yeah, you're being hunted, but it's definitely a camper slasher movie. Like, it has a different flavor to it.
Yeah, and then you could do a whole separate episode on the Wrong Turn movies.
Yeah, yeah,
Which
or the, I mean, I never would, but the what were the ones that pedophile made?
oh
Jeepers
god.
Creepers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same basic idea. And they all have a lot in common with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because Texas Chainsaw Massacre is basically one of the three most important horror movies ever made. It all comes back to them, or to it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
No, but
the
this one's good too, man. I mean,
yeah,
I
oh yeah. I mean,
it
it's
it,
not it's
it
not
takes
Chainsaw Massacre good, but it's
no.
definitely good. It's not quite as good as Deliverance either, but Deliverance has so much budget in its favor. And I should say right off the bat, there is no good release of this movie. There is a
I
Blu-ray. We watched. I found a streaming version of the Blu-ray that some kind soul put up on YouTube. It might not even be there anymore by the time we record this. that's as good as it gets right now.
Yeah, and I mean, both with this movie and the one we're going to talk about next, I got a little confused, but
Yeah.
mainly because here scenes were shot way too dark at
Yep.
times.
And then it's they're working from print sources,
Hmm.
and so they're even darker. Yeah, there are scenes that are just, and the funny thing is, I almost called you Patrick. The funny thing is, Jim, when I saw this on VHS, it was like 100 times worse. Like there were
Oh,
long scenes where it just was blackness and crumbling of people stepping on things and arguing.
yeah, that's it's like what's happening here? But no, I mean, once it's a slow start, but I mean, of course, we want to establish all the character dynamics and that I don't mind that. I don't mind that it's like let's get to the good stuff. But once the deer head appears, and of course, like I'm anticipating all these things to go wrong and all these traps being set up, and every character is going to meet some sort of demise. But I there's something just about like I was talking about earlier with Robert's Blossom. There's something about Hal Holbrook as an actor that's just so human. It's just like he's so relatable and grounded. I don't know if you've seen the film Natural Enemies, but that
No,
that is I mean really like his performance in that really makes that movie, it elevates it so strongly and beautifully because he just seems like an everyman, like a guy that you would run into on the bus or something or just I think there's just something naturalistic about his approach to acting that never seems over the top. And I think I just love that groundedness of him as a performer, but just also I think he's the one you can most likely get on board with throughout this movie. I mean, like
yeah,
his friend towards the end, Mitzi, just screaming so much his name. I was like he was getting on my nerve. I mean, he got on my nerves a lot, but still.
that's kind of, yeah. I mean, well, if the value of Deranged is that it is what you think of as a horror movie, but it's being filtered through all these other genre and stylistic lenses, I think the value of this one is, yes, it is a really nasty like almost slasher era ripoff of a more subtle movie, slightly more subtle movie,
Hmm.
but it has such good performances.
Yeah,
And there's
absolutely.
none of the there's it's just some guys. They're all older guys, so I hate to say it, but there's no sex appeal going on. Your sexiest guy is Holbrook, and Holbrook's fine, but yeah, he's not. I don't know if I would call Holbrook a sex symbol. Yeah, the other actors are Lawrence Dane, Robin Gamel, Ken James, and Gary Reinecke, sorry. But I mean, Holbrook, who is also an American, not a Canadian, he hadn't done that much at this point. He had been in Magnum Force, but he had been in All the President's Men. He played, I believe, he plays
Oh, right.
uh, uh, Deep Throat in that. And then after this, he would be in Creep Show and the Fog, so he'd become more of a horror guy. But that would be like, what is Creep Show 82? That's several years after this.
Hmm.
So he was most known for playing Mark Twain on the stage, was his biggest claim to fame. But then he's just one of those faces who was in everything in the 80s and 90s on television, as a decent sized speaking role in a million different movies that you would see and forgot you ever watched. So
Oh, for
he's
sure.
very familiar face.
He
But by
played he
putting,
played Abraham Lincoln in the miniseries Lincoln. I think the same year as this, or around
yeah,
the same
I
time.
think, and that was like an award winner.
Hmm.
I believe that. Yeah. So there's just something about how good the actors are, but also how realistic they are. And like you said, they can be really obnoxious.
Yeah.
And they spend most of the movie fighting. That's part of like the underlying thing that's going on, is these are guys who don't actually seem to like each other very much. That they've just been friends for so long. And I've known people like that. I've never been
They
in that
just put up with each
situation.
other. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never personally been in that situation, but I've known people like that. That sort of sets us up for later arguments about who we sacrifice to get out of this situation.
Yeah. Yeah. That's always hard to see, but I want to see a movie with Hal Holbrook as Rambo, because
Well,
like
that
I mean,
yeah,
that look he has. I mean, once he ties that red, what do you call it? Like when you tie it around your head like a headband.
yeah.
I'm just like, did the makers of Rambo see this movie? I
Well,
mean,
I actually looked into this, and because there's the other attachment is that the
I should say
killer,
First Blood, actually.
First Blood, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
the killer, he's sort of a John Rambo if instead of being a
Mm,
drifter who is the victim, he was a guy who purposely took himself out of society and didn't want people near
yeah,
him. And the
yeah.
reason he's attacking these guys is because he had botched surgery during World War II,
Right. So
and
he
so
holds a grudge against
he holds a grudge. As soon
doctors.
as
Yeah.
he's eavesdropping on them at the beginning, and he hears that they're doctors, so you get the feeling he doesn't do this to everybody who comes into his forest. He's not like the Deliverance guys or the
Hmm.
just before dawn guys. He probably eavesdrops and then ignores them as if they're not going to come near his little cabin. Uh, but the connections to First Blood are interesting, and the First Blood movie didn't come out until '82,
Right.
but the book, David Morrell's book, was released in '72, and it was a very popular
Hmm.
book. So
Hmm.
I do wonder, this is another thing, I don't have the Blu-ray, there's not that much information on it. I looked into stuff and nobody mentions First Blood, but it seems possible that the writers had read First Blood, because again, it was a popular book, and Vietnam vets were a even though this guy's a World War II vet, Vietnam vets were a pretty hot button subject already. I mean, look at Death Dream. Death Dream is one of the first movies to actually have to deal with post traumatic
Hmm.
stress from Vietnam specifically. So
No, and again, like there's this real sense of danger, kind of, you know, accentuated a little bit by the geography of everything taking place, and just the of course there's going to be a scene where he's on one the guy who's been seriously injured. Again, another isn't another animal trap like underwater.
yeah, I was gonna say when you brought it up the
It's
first
all
time, yes,
connected.
and I didn't think of it until you brought it up. But yeah, both Deranged and this have a bear trap crush
Ugh.
someone.
Yeah,
Um,
that's awful. But of course, he ends up on like a stretcher that they make, and they're down the river, and he gets away at one point. I'm just like, yeah, this is exactly what I expect to happen if I'm out in nature and I get hurt.
yeah,
All these things that are happening to them, and plus they just really have a hard time getting along, and they hold resentment, and like he even like I think it's Mitski,
Mitzi.
Mitzi, yeah, who like tells Harry like he says, "Oh, your dad died of cancer," and blah blah blah. I'm just like, why are you bringing that up? I would
Yeah,
attack you too.
so having seen this now 3 times, I picked up on a couple things, and so the idea there is that Holbrook's character did not get along with his dad and just let him die, whereas
Oh,
they
right,
must have
right.
been friends prior, so Mitzi stayed with the dad as he died.
I see.
And so
Yeah.
and then he resents him for that. So like Mitzi is this annoying brat of a guy, but he isn't wrong. You
Mhm.
know,
Yeah.
there are points where you're like, yeah, you kind of got to leave the other guy. You and come back for him at best.
Mhm.
And
No,
you're
yeah,
not actually helping him by dragging him. I like the way, God, I have so many notes on this movie. I like the way that this and Deliverance are both about war. And where
sure.
Deliverance is like it's like the Vietnam thing where you've gone into an area where you're just not ready for the locals. Whereas this one is about how war can turn you into a monster instead of,
Mhm.
I just think it's interesting that they have connected in that way. And I think that the most important element to survival horror of any kind is even beyond compelling characters, which are always a plus, but is the escalation of threat.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think this movie has a really good sense. It doesn't have the best scares. Like I think it doesn't, like, the jump scares don't really work for me, but its sense of escalation is really well done because it's not a very long movie and we spend almost half of it with very little happening. And
Right.
so it starts to escalate where their shoes are stolen. They have a deer's head left at their camp. They have a hornet's nest thrown at them. They fall down a hill. The guy steps in the bear trap.
Mm.
uh, they find their dead friend's head. Uh,
Oh, that's
uh,
that's a hell of a moment because, like, he throws it off,
yeah, he
throws it
freaks
down the
out.
mountain, and yeah.
And then the worst is they find the guy who had gone ahead. Who, the one thing that doesn't work in this movie is they keep trying to imply they kind of red herring the brother that it was his idea to go here and he goes ahead of him because he's the only one who's brought 2 pairs of shoes. They're sort of hinting at a red herring where he's the one doing all this for some reason,
Oh, yeah,
and you
yeah.
never buy that.
I didn't buy that.
But he's been put into this sort of traction and kept alive and left to die of exposure, and Holbrook has to put him at mercy kill him basically.
Oh
And
yeah, that
that
was.
is really gruesome.
And he keeps yeah, the veteran, who ultimately is the killer, stalking them. It keeps leaving like X-rays at
Yeah.
every turn
And
too.
so they're figuring out, and which is good storytelling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it
uh,
keeps you interested and
and it's a
curious.
good way to dump exposition too without it being too awkward.
Yeah,
uh, yeah, I because you're taking it, these guys are screaming and yelling at each other constantly, and sometimes when you scream and yell, you can dump exposition without it sounding unnatural.
yeah. I mean, like you're talking about. I also think movies where men are kind of repeatedly tested by their environment, and just like how they're trying to adapt to these really intense situations, but they're also, think they know it all, or they're stubborn, or they just don't know how to handle it. I think it's ultimately just really interesting to follow. And uh I really like just seeing what's ultimately going to happen. But then again, like I was talking about earlier, the only thing that is a strike against it, and maybe this can get cleaned up at some point, I don't know, but even during the climax, that's when it gets, I mean, really dark. And I was
Yeah,
like really trying to figure out, well, what's he doing at this moment? I know he's got the wound and it's gushing, and yeah, I
yeah,
can
he's
kind of
trying
make it
to
out. Yeah,
seal his femoral artery while his
right.
friend is burning to death. And
Yes.
so he can either go save his friend. Yeah, it's not quite well put together, because the idea is he can either save his friend and bleed to death, or save himself and his friend will burn to death. And it's not quite put together in a way that we understand he can only do one or the other. It
Hmm.
seems like he's just failing to do them both
Yeah.
in the context of the movie, but it's still pretty intense. Another thing I think they do really well that's subtle, that could look much better if you have a nice print of this, is that there are visual references to like literature, I think, that I never noticed before. Because like the idea of them going down the river is clearly Heart of Darkness, and again,
Mm.
this was before Apocalypse Now, so it's another one where I feel like it was ahead of the curve. It's trying to rip off Deliverance, but it's also ahead of the curve for First Blood and Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
And they sort of like end up in this dried out windy stretch that's been destroyed by wildfire, and I suddenly was, oh my god, they're trekking into Hades. This is just Dante's Inferno. Like, I had never put that together before, but that they really do walk into hell at their worst. There's no more water to help them go upstream. They have to drag their friend across rocky dryness. And it makes, they're in the middle of Canada. What, or not the middle, they're south part of Canada where it's nice and green. Why is there this horrible area here?
Yeah.
And then one other thing I think they're ahead on, that might, I don't know, might have had this on mind, is Jigsaw. The killer Jigsaw has similar motivation to the ritual killer.
Wow. Yeah, I hadn't put that together. That's a
And
good
I would
call.
not be surprised
Huh.
if James Wan and what's his name had seen this movie and were fans of it.
Sure.
Especially, we were already talking about the connections between Ozploitation and Canuxploitation.
Yeah,
Um,
it's interesting that he does hold this grudge against all doctors for like a botched operation, and
mhm.
yeah, all that too. But no, I mean, it's, I will say, like, I mean, it's really it's really intense. It really gets under your skin, and yet at the same time, there are moments of like, oh, that's a beautiful shot, and certainly the final shot of him just sitting on the highway is just like that
Yeah.
open road ahead of him, and yeah,
Which
it's
they might
kind of
have kind
beautiful.
of borrowed from Chainsaw Massacre too, now that I
Mhm.
think about it, because ends with her on the highway escaping, but we don't know where.
Yeah,
And it's sort of
yeah.
like the highway is the way you can finally escape the horrors, the horrible rural nature.
Right, because yeah, hopefully a car will come along and save you.
Yeah.
Hopefully, but no, yeah, it's. I don't know why certain movies like we're talking about. I don't know. They just get so lost under the radar. They never got a proper release or
Well,
something. That they
and
just
this was hated. That was something I didn't know. I read
weird.
a little bit I could find. Siskel and Ebert named it the Dog of the Month twice, or
What?
Dog of the Week twice. They hated it.
Hmm.
And so it really took some time for people to say, no, this is actually an interesting movie. It's not just a gross, because it is. I mean, it is really shockingly violent at sometimes for 1977. Like, we're still not quite post. I feel like post Dawn of the Dead is when we start going, yeah, yeah, anything goes. We can just be super, super violent.
Yeah.
Dawn of the Dead, and then, like, 1980 Friday the 13th comes out, and we're just going to be nasty.
I'm still confused by some of Ebert's responses to horror films, and yet he had a love for the original Last House on the Left.
I've always kind of hated that point, honestly. It
Yeah,
drives me nuts.
it's so weird.
Yeah, I've the way he talks about horror movies in a lot of his earlier career in the 70s, and he like does stuff like he says that he accuses the people in the audience of being sex criminals and stuff. Like it's really
Oh yeah,
over the
the
top
spit on your
annoying.
grave
Yeah,
review.
and
Yeah,
it's like, and I don't like I Spit on Your Grave, but I'm not going to blame the people watching it. Like, I don't know.
yeah.
Always had problems with Ebert, especially a great writer, but I don't think he and I have a lot in common as far as our taste in film.
Especially, yeah, he had questionable taste in genre films. So,
One thing I wanted to know if you noticed, because I had
Mhm.
somehow missed this the other two times I saw this movie. Did you notice that the Robin Gamel character, while having a heart to heart, he plays a character named Martin. Well, he's having a heart to heart with Hal Holbrook before he gets bear trapped. He's talking about how his life has fallen apart, and he just sort of casually drops that he has a boyfriend that he is neglecting.
Yes, I did notice that, and part of me was like, "Huh, I was not expecting to hear that for sure." But it's
And there, yeah, and then so later in the movie when Mitzi calls him the F slur, I thought that was just because it was
yeah.
1970 and men called each other the F slur, but I think it was actually supposed to be a pointed thing that they all know this about him, and they actually do respect him,
Mhm.
but that Mitzi's in such a bad state that he's just trying to hurt everybody
Yeah,
around
it's
him.
interesting. It's sort of just treated as like an afterthought or not
Just
like
casual, and
yeah, casual, right, that's the
it's
right
not brought up that it's part of, like, he's not played otherwise in any sort of what I'd call stereotypical fashion, and it only comes up the one time,
Mhm.
and it's not the reason his life is bad, it's that, he just can't hold his life together, and he
Yeah.
mentions he has a nice boyfriend that he can't hold together. Yeah, so I thought that was really interesting. And then according to that they came from within the book, the writer Ian Sutherland actually met with Canadian World War II vets who
Oh.
had been prisoners in Hong Kong in the 40s, early 40s. So he did sort of like, he didn't base any of the characters specifically off the vets, but he wanted to be around and understand how they were thinking because he hadn't been in the war. So it's like it's a nice touch.
Yeah, for sure.
And then yeah, the reason why this finally picked up was actually Stephen King, which sometimes is the case, but Stephen King really liked it and mentioned it in some interview at some point. It might have been mentioned in his
Oh, right,
nonfiction book,
dance or the dance
Danse
macabre.
Macabre.
Yeah,
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 it
yeah.
might have been in there. But after he said something, then people were like, "Oh, okay, maybe we should look into this." Like, you can also give him credit for making Alligator into a kind of long-term cult movie, because I think that one was also overlooked until he said, "No, this is a really special movie."
Yeah, and of course, The Evil Dead.
Yeah, well, in the Evil Dead, in that case, he helped it make money on the first case in like
Right.
theaters.
Mhm.
Yeah. So my only last question for you is if you were in the same situation and you
Oh.
stumbled into the killer's shack,
Oh.
would you eat the mystery meat that's just hanging from his ceiling like Hal Holbrook does?
Depends on how hungry I was,
I
but
mean, he was
probably
very
not.
hungry. He was very hungry, but he just sort of grabs it down, smells it, and starts eating it right.
Well, I mean, I guess it passed the smell test. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe he just like, well, this'll do for now.
It
Yeah, I don't
seems
know.
like deer. I'm pretty sure this is deer.
Yeah, well, he had a deer head. Maybe this is the rest of the
Yeah.
carcass cooked. Hopefully, I wouldn't. I got a sensitive stomach, man. I wouldn't risk it.
I think I would have died before I even made it to the shack,
Yeah,
honestly. I actually probably wouldn't have moved. I probably would have said, "Nah, we got to stay here, guys. That someone has to know we're here." And I would have tried to hunker down. I think that would be what I ended up doing.
yeah.
Um,
I don't go camping.
yeah.
It's just not my thing. I mean, I'll go on like a nature trail walk once in a while just
Mhm.
to like get out of the city and the hustle and bustle and everything. But I never have this desire to be like, oh, I want to stay overnight here and make a fire and hang out all night because I think that would be terrifying, to be honest.
The movie does a really good job of explaining just like how isolated they are. Obviously, they don't have cell
Hmm.
phones because it's the 70s, but they don't have an accurate map. They had to be flown in, so they can't just walk out easily. And they can't start a fire because then the guy will know where they are. Well, that's what they think. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously the guy knows where they are anyway, so they might as well have started a fire. But but yeah, they can't like even cook themselves food. They have all these MREs that they can't boil because they're afraid to start a fire. It's just it's really well done as far as just the way the idea is set up and how it gets through those things.
Yeah, it's good.
So
It's very
yeah,
good.
if it's still on YouTube, watch it. Otherwise, maybe someday someone will find the negatives in like a vault somewhere or someone's closet. So let's move
Oh
on
boy.
to one that is sold as a horror movie, but definitely is not a horror movie. I Miss You, Hugs and Kisses from 1978. This is also known as Drop Dead Dearest and Left for Dead. I like both I Miss You, Hugs and Kisses and Drop Dead Dearest. Those are both great
Hmm.
titles. This is directed by Murray Markowitz. You know, I didn't intend this to be a running gag, but that's another Polish last name I can pronounce. I just realized. He only made 4 movies, including a documentary short, but he worked in television. So it's gets here. And so for the reason the reason anybody remembers this film exists is because for some unimaginable reason, it is one of the official original British video nasties, meaning it was banned on VHS alongside Cannibal Holocaust and I Spit on Your Grave.
That's insane.
And it's
I
just crazy. There's no reason. The violence is so awkwardly shot that like the goriest things that happen are like Herschel Gordon Lewis levels
Yeah.
at
Well,
most.
I mean, like the only moment really is just that that hitman kills the schoolgirl in the you know.
I mean, this is there's a clubbing scene that is gross.
Hmm.
There's a bludgeoning murder,
Yes. Yeah.
and we cut back to it a couple times. And yeah, that stabbing does imply necrophilia. I'm going to
Right.
talk more about that scene in a bit because I think it's such a weird, random scene.
It sure is.
And
It's a
there is a
weird
really
random movie.
Yeah, and there's a really callous scene. The star is Elkie Summer is the one who's killed, and there's this really callous scene where they take her body and they strip her before putting her in a bag, and it's just an excuse to look at her butt, pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. She's
But
from Lisa and the Devil, right?
yeah, Lisa and the Devil and Baron Blood.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, she's. Well, I'll talk about her a little bit too. She's weird. She's perfect for this movie, I guess.
Yeah.
But there's this like theory out there that some of the movies that ended up on the video nasties were just there because they were so either ineptly made or weirdly made that the censors got disturbed by how this doesn't make sense and why does this exist. So if there was any gore at all, it would freak them out. And and I think that this movie is a perfect example of it, where it has this sort of mediocrity to it, but it is put together in such an insane way that I feel like censors could be, after watching I Spit on Your Grave and Cannibal Holocaust and Cannibal Ferox, and you don't like these movies and you're watching them just for censorship purposes, if you see this movie, then you think you're going crazy. And so
Yeah.
then you're like, you know
That's
what? I
what I
don't think
felt
anybody else
like.
should watch this movie.
I did feel that way a little bit. I mean, I wouldn't say it's like edited like a Nicholas Rogue movie, but it's just kind of. I wouldn't even say it's inept. It's just weird. It's just a weirdly put together movie that jumps around and, and at the same time it has like a almost like a soap opera vibe going
Yeah.
on. And yet there's trying to solve the mystery, and it's also a courtroom drama. I mean, it's like a real mashup where at times I kind of felt alienated from it, and the fact that it never found like a tonal consistency, but yet at the same time I'm like, well, it's a courtroom drama, so I got to find out if he's guilty or not. So I mean
Yeah.
that's what I always think about that. Maybe that's why I can get behind like most Grisham adaptations, because it's such like an easy way to hook an audience. Is just, well, we got to find out if he did it or not,
Right.
and what does the jury think, and did he do it, did he not, and are we going to figure out how and why? And so I mean, again, it's like a good mystery, but unfortunately I don't know if I really cared enough to really get caught up. But at the same time, like you're talking about, it's edited like a fever dream. It's edited in this really bizarre way that I kind of found, at least to like, compelling enough, but I also was confused at times. So, and just like some terrible line deliveries.
I mean,
Uh,
there's even a cutaway to a POW prison camp escape scene
yeah.
that happened. They cut away to it a couple times. So like, it's not just a courtroom drama, and not just a sensationalized a true crime account, and it's not just a soap opera, but it also has this POW scene, and then this, as we said, this murder scene that's tossed in.
Hmm.
out of nowhere, just to have a red herring. Absolutely, there's a serial killer who's also involved, and it's just to have the serial killer aspect. What it initially reminds me of, if you take out the weird editing, is that it's a trashy made for TV movie of the week.
Yeah, yeah. It
It's
makes
like,
sense that this director would mostly focus on TV then.
yeah, and so yeah, it's like Death of the Cheerleader or Woman Scorned.
Mm.
I always remember,
Yeah, this could be a lifetime, like it with that
yeah,
title even.
this I wrote in my notes. This movie walked so that Lifetime Originals could run.
Yeah.
Uh, the one I always remember, you're about around my age, was in 1993. There were two Amy Fisher TV
Oh
movies,
yeah, one with Drew
Casualties of
Barrymore.
Love and
Yeah.
The Long Island Leda. One had Alyssa Milano
Yep.
as Amy Fisher, and the other one, the Amy Fisher story, had Drew Barrymore as Amy Fisher. And they were released on, I think, ABC and CBS, competing networks. And I remember it being like a topic.
Yeah, I remember them. Yeah, like it's something you would see in TV Guide that they were almost like competing against each other.
Yeah,
It's kind of funny. Like, and those are the things that like my mom was so huge into true crime. Like, well, I guess I know what I'm watching with my mom tonight,
yeah.
just because I was so curious about these true events happening. And oh, I think Alyssa Milano is cute, so I'm going to watch this for sure. But still at the same time, it's just kind of yeah,
It's
trashy TV, but it's
but
still
it's
fun.
so, yeah. And then this movie takes that idea, which is mediocrity. Those movies exist to be mediocre. They are junk food, and this one takes junk food and then just like, it's like the editor was crazy, or maybe he didn't have enough footage.
Mm,
I say I didn't actually look it up. Maybe they didn't have enough footage to work from, or there's a weird phenomenon, before home video was big, where they would take movies and shorten them so that they could
sure.
put them on 8 millimeter reels to watch at home, and they just cut out anything that wasn't absolutely necessary. Because
Yeah.
it's like so much stuff happens off screen, and then there is, right off the bat, we have a flashback within a flashback within a flashback.
I know
Eh,
it just drove me nuts a little, but I mean, at the same time, I'm like, this is such a weird way to tell this story. I mean, most courtroom dramas aren't told this way, so
yeah, they'll have
I'll give it that.
flashbacks,
Yeah.
but you don't have a flashback and then have a different flashback, and some of it they're clearly doing it on purpose, because the like third level flashbacks have purposely blown out white levels to look
Mm,
dreamier.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's like they are sort of they're doing visual things to separate the timelines, but but because you don't understand what's going on, it doesn't matter. You're like, okay, I guess we're in a different timeline now, but I don't know what that means in the context of the story. In the there's I have a book, about the video nasties, called See No Evil, and the author, David Kirkes and David Slater, whichever one is writing this section, he says that it's so complicated it would give Peter Greenaway a headache, which I really liked.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
I think that they forgot that they had a daughter. Like the very first scene of the family, there's a kid, and they don't really imply who she is. There's just a kid, and then 50 minutes. I looked at the timer. It was about 50 minutes into the movie. Suddenly, this guy. I should explain what the story is here. This is based on a real crime.
Right.
It was the true story of Peter Demeter, who was a Hungarian-born real estate developer who was convicted of hiring someone to kill his wife, who was Austrian model Christine Ferrari. And this happened in 1974, and it was the longest running trial in Canadian history up until that point. And it was revealed during the trial that Christine might have also been plotting to murder him, and that they were both looking to possibly collect $100 million life insurance policy. In reality, he was found guilty. This movie takes that and changes the names, and then they add in this one scene of a serial killer just to have more doubt. Because for whatever reason, Makowitz has decided that his version of the story is going to have the man be, innocent. It's almost presented like the director had a chip on his shoulder. He's like, no, that guy got railroaded. We should make a movie explaining what really happened. And so when you know the actual story isn't that far off from this, it just makes it even more baffling. It would be
Yeah.
like someone making a OJ movie where, some small fact that came out about Nicole Brown would have been like turned into, well, maybe she did it to herself kind of situation. Like it seems like it was that weird of them to do it that way.
Yeah, I wonder how, like, the family estate would
Yeah,
think
well,
of
that's why
this.
they had to change the names, and at the
Yeah.
beginning of the movie, they're like, "This isn't based on a true story." I wrote down, it says, "The film you're about to see is fiction, although the basic idea from the film was inspired by an actual event. The circumstances and characters have been deliberately and extensively altered, so that any resemblance to the actual events or actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental." You can't
Mm.
say that. You can't say it, the basic idea that was inspired by an actual event, and then say any
Yeah,
resemblance is
it's
purely coincidental.
it is
Coincidental.
contradicting. Yeah.
You can't say those two things. And
It's
but yeah, during the real case, nobody testified that she had hired them to kill him.
right.
That's something that the movie added all this, but
Well, and I'm also curious at the end. I mean, it's saying that he's innocent, but we see two different guys bludgeoning her.
yeah, the idea is,
One's a serial killer, and the other
yeah,
is, uh,
one of the hitmen, or
yeah,
he's sort of like a low level gangster guy.
right, right.
Yeah, and so the idea is we don't know who did it, but it probably wasn't him.
Okay,
And it's
yeah,
like,
that's what I
yeah,
thought. That's what I thought.
yeah, and it's so wonderfully maudlin, like just like eye rollingly hilarious, because the guilty verdict is being read and he's running through his memories, just in case this like makes sense out of this movie that makes zero sense. And he's running through all these things and he's saying things to himself, and he says, Was I prejudged because of my wealth? Was my
Mm.
mistake that I married a beautiful woman? And it's just like all this victimhood, like, was I too perfect for this world and that they all hate me because of it? It was definitely like something you would imagine, not to bring it to this, but it's something that if Donald Trump had been found guilty of something, that he would exactly say these things. It's just because I was too successful and my wife was too beautiful that these people don't like me.
Yeah, talk about a narcissist. My God.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the best thing I can say though, it's like I if sometimes I keep thinking like it's because I always have this desire to compartmentalize and make lists out of everything, but I would probably put, Howard Shore as one of my top 10 favorite
Yeah.
composers at the very least. And, he's Cronenberg's main squeeze for sure. So like when I saw his name pop up in this, I'm like, well, this is going to have a good score because most of the time I'm always on board for what he does.
And
Uh,
it's pretty good. It's not
yeah.
like Lord of the Rings level, but it,
No,
it, it
no.
adds some production value to a very, very cheap looking movie.
Yeah. It's
And
a
this was
weird
the
movie
year
to
before The Brood, I believe. So this was his first.
It's a weird movie to watch on Tubi.
With
Well,
ads, makes
yeah,
it even worse. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah. It was a little weird. Like suddenly I'm watching an ad for T-Mobile, and like because it's such a. Sometimes I really do wonder who makes the decisions of when to cut or when to cut to commercial.
I
Like
feel
in
like
this
it's,
it kind of fit because it's like, all right, yeah, this movie's so weirdly edited. Why not cut to a T-Mobile commercial? But
yeah.
still,
And it
uh,
definitely feels made for TV,
yeah.
even though it technically wasn't. It feels made for TV. This was Markowitz's, I think I said Makowitz earlier, Markowitz's second true crime movie. He had made one a couple years before called Recommendation for Mercy. So I think he got this job off of that. And I
Mm.
just have a feeling that that movie makes more sense. I don't know why. I just have a feeling that if I ever found that movie somewhere and watched it, it would be a totally mediocre, fine junk food true crime thing. Well, now we can talk about Elke Summer, who, she's German instead of Austrian, but otherwise, pretty much spot on casting because she was a model herself. She was a Playboy centerfold, and she had Hollywood and European careers. She was in some of the Carry On movies, and
Oh,
yeah,
right.
she was in Baron Blood, Lisa and the Devil, and then she did the reshoots for the House of the Exorcism, which was them trying to make Lisa and the Devil into an Exorcist ripoff. She did all those reshoots. She's not a great actress, but she fits the film.
Yeah, I
Um,
thought so.
because she has that sort of soap opera-ness to her. And then the actual lead, Donald Pylon or Pelon, I'm not sure. He is the so bad it's good flavor here, because he just has these turn on a dime things where he like it's like a soap opera on amphetamines. He's so histrionic at times. It
Yeah.
just comes out of nowhere. He had a pretty long career, so I'm guessing it was the way he was being directed. And again, it just feels like the whole movie was shot like in weird order, so nobody remembers what they're doing that day.
Yeah, it's very inconsistent in that way, and his performance is just all over the place.
Her
But
performance,
it fits the movie because
yeah,
it's kind of all over the place.
her performance is weird too. Like she's, it seems like her main crime up until she tries to have him killed is that she's just a cold fish, and
Hmm.
like that's enough reason for us to want her to die, which is pretty fucked up.
Yeah.
But there is a scene where she discovers he's cheating on her and she breaks down crying when every other scene in this movie says she would cheer and say, "Yes, I have blackmail." And
Right.
I hate this man anyway. But instead, she has this really elongated crying scene. It's very strange.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, the daughter. I mean, like he tells his daughter like this story about a failing marriage while his wife is in the room.
Yeah,
That's so weird.
that's so that really felt, that was a very soap opera like Days of Our Lives
Yeah.
type thing.
No, for sure.
I guess the other recognizable actor is George Touliados, who is this character actor. He's got a really big nose and really buggy eyes, and he usually has a big mustache. And I've seen on a million TV shows. And I think he's kind of easy to confuse with Lee J. Cobb.
Oh
So
yeah.
I think I thought it was Lee J. Cobb for a second. Like, how the fuck did Lee J. Cobb? But then I'm like, no, he's not nearly old enough, is he? And so I looked it up, and yeah, it was this other guy. But yeah, he's in a million TV shows. Ultimately, this is a case of an unremarkable movie that probably would have been forgotten if it had not been on the video nasties, and now it became a sought after collector's item. There was just a pretty big Severin
Hmm.
remaster, and I think there's a lot of extras on the Blu-ray. The Severin sale isn't until later this month though, so I wasn't about to pay full price for this movie.
No, I. It's definitely the weakest of the ones we watched,
Yeah,
but
it's
uh,
interesting though. It's
it
very
is
weird.
interesting. I didn't feel like it was a waste of time. It was just more like, what's going on now? Okay,
Yeah,
we're over here. We're over there. Okay, this is a flashback. Okay, this is, and then we go back to the murder again. And I don't know. It just didn't. I don't know. The editor uh, probably could have used a little more time working on this film to make it a little more coherent. But
yeah.
I still found it interesting, and I wanted to know what was going to happen. So, but
It's funny how
it's
it just,
weird.
I think I've seen it also 3 times, and it escapes my brain after a couple weeks. You know, it's a good
Yeah,
thing
I
I
don't think I'll be
watched it.
thinking about this one
Yeah,
very much.
it's just like what's the word? Vaporware. It's like a vaporware movie.
Yeah, but I mean, the one we're ending with is probably my favorite. So.
Well, okay, yeah, so let's move on to speaking of weird
Oh
and
yes,
movies
my kind of weird.
that are hard to describe. I mean, all these movies are hard to describe on a genre level, and I think that's, I didn't do that on purpose. I wasn't thinking ahead that much, but it ended up working really well as a quadruple feature because of that.
Yeah, they're
Um,
not like straight ahead horror.
no, none of them are,
Yeah.
and they all have some really weird thing going on that makes them unique. Even though they're like on paper, it's like, oh, this is the Ed Gein story. Well, no, this is Deliverance ripoff. Well, no, this is true crime sensationalism. Well, no. And so, yeah, the last one we looked at was Pin, which is
Oh
AKA
boy.
Pin the Plastic Nightmare. This is from 1988. This is directed by Sandor Stern, and this was his directorial debut and the only theatrically released movie he ever directed. He worked in a lot of television and successful as a theatrical writer. His biggest claim to fame is he wrote Amityville Horror, and I don't really like that movie, but I don't think of it as having a bad script, so I don't think it's
He
his
did one
fault.
of the sequels
He
apparently.
did the made for TV sequel.
Oh my gosh. I
Amityville
need to
the
watch that because ever since I've seen Amityville It's About Time, which I really like, I'm like, maybe there's other good Amityville
Evil
sequels.
Escapes is his,
Okay.
yeah. And then Amityville 2 is my favorite because it's just, it's
Mhm.
an Italian horror director ripping off Sam Raimi
Sure.
instead of ripping off Amityville. It's very strange.
Yeah. There's too
Uh,
many of those movies. You just go on
oh,
Tubi
there's
and type
hundreds
in
of them.
Amityville and there's
I
like,
think
I don't
that
know.
it must be, you can't copyright it. I don't think. I don't
No.
think you can copyright the name of a town. If you had a movie, yeah, like The Haunting in Connecticut, if that had been a huger hit, you could have just kept on making unrelated movies with Connecticut and haunting in the title, and nobody could have stopped you. This guy, he also co-wrote the John and Yoko A Love Story TV movie in the 80s, and I think I've
Oh,
seen that
wow.
one. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure I've seen that one.
Hmm.
And this time I'm going to read the synopsis as Letterboxd describes it, because it is, it doesn't, it's not the kind of thing you would sit down and write. You know, it's weird. So Pin is a plastic medical dummy. He has been the fixation of Leon since his youth. Now grown up and orphaned in an accident, Leon brings Pin home to live with him and his sister Ursula, much to her reluctance. Soon, however, Leon's fixation with Pin spirals out of control. Again, if we really, really break it down, this is also Psycho.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah.
this is
It all comes full
transference
circle.
of personality. This is a story about child abuse and how it affects people,
Yeah.
and it's really a melodrama for a lot of the movie, and it's just
Surprisingly so. Yeah, I was kind of like thinking, well, this it does feel very 80s.
yeah.
You have the great Terry O'Quinn here, who was so good in The Stepfather. But, I guess
He hadn't been in The Stepfather yet, I realized. So this is pretty early, and it's not
wasn't Step
early in
I
his.
thought Stepfather was 87 for some reason.
No, I think that, or maybe he had just been in Stepfather.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, I mean, it's like that was one of those movies I rented um pretty early on, and certainly with that made a huge impression on me. That movie, Stepfathers, to where I'm like, man, that's one of those memorable characters that you just can't unsee. Like, even as I'm watching Lost, I'm still thinking of the
Yeah,
stepfather at times, even though he looks different and acts different. It's just, I almost feel like that's what he's going to be known for. But here, yeah, for the time that he's in this film, which isn't the whole movie, he really makes an impression
you're
again.
right. The Stepfather came out in '87, so he
Yeah.
plays a father in this too, a fucked up father, a completely different kind of fucked up father. But maybe that's what got him the job.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, I mean, and movies about like codependency and people trying to control
I mean, yeah,
the other.
yeah, it's based on a 1981 book by Andrew Niederman, and it was also called Pin. And Pin is short for Pinocchio. That's why the
Hmm.
name comes from. And what I found interesting was when and you'll see it on the webpage for this episode. I was looking for posters to use in the collages I put together, and I found one of the covers to the book. And it was, I don't know if you remember, the VC Andrews books had these covers that would be a frame, and you could open the cover and there'd be something within the frame. So there'd be like a scared face in a house,
Oh.
and you'd open it up and then you'd see inside why she was scared. And it was the same artist, I believe his name is Milton Charles, who did those VC Andrew books covers. And I was like, so then I spent the whole movie going, this is sort of a VC Andrews movie, but I'm not an expert on VC Andrews. I only really know Flowers in the Attic.
Yeah, yeah,
But
that's the one,
this has
probably
a,
the only one I've read, and yeah, I'm looking at your like a collection of these covers. I totally remember this. Yeah.
yeah. And so I'm like, this is kind of like Flowers in the Attic. And then then just before I after I watched it and I went on Letterbox to like mark that I had watched it for myself, our friend Chloe's Not Afraid had watched it, and I even commented on her short review, but I missed the part where she said Niederman was one of VC Andrews's ghostwriters.
Oh my god.
So me trying to make all these connections, and I'm like, am I crazy because I don't really know VC Andrews that well? So maybe I'm doing some, I'm reading too much into it. But then yeah, no, I think it is really it really is a lot like a VC Andrews story, because it doesn't have, I mean, Flowers in the Attic we know is about abusive
Mhm.
parents, and it does have incest. This movie doesn't have incest, but it has this sort of uncomfortable older brother trying to control his younger sister's sexuality thing,
Yeah. I
which,
mean, I guess it's implied that he's attracted to her,
yeah,
but
I'm not even sure, honestly. I'm
yeah.
not sure they went that route. It's more that he is in wants to be in control. He wants
Yeah.
to control who she, because he only really seems to care about her and Pin. He doesn't even seem to really like their dad very much. I mean, and there, I mean, it's a fuck. The dad is this guy, and I've known people like this who just think their children are boring and turn childhood into intellectual exercise.
Ugh.
And so he's making them before bed do math exercises to prove their intelligence, and so he's really fucking them up.
And
Uh,
and
and him
speaking
and
of
the
fucking
boy,
him up, like, are you, did he performed an abortion on his own daughter?
yes, and
It's
later in the movie she gets pregnant.
oh.
One thing I like about the movie is that the movie doesn't judge her for being sexually active and interested in sex. It's
Hmm.
actually, she's the hero of the piece and she's the normal person.
Right.
I do like that. But yes, and not only does he perform abortion on his own daughter, but he invites and is sort of disappointed that the brother doesn't want to sit in on it.
Yeah. That. Oh God, forgot about that.
So
You're
it's a movie
right.
like that where it's not a
Oh.
horror movie, but then things like that will happen and you're just really icked out by it.
Yeah.
Just the idea of a life-size see-through anatomical doll that just sits at a pediatrician's office, I would lose my mind if I was a child.
Oh yeah.
Eh,
I would have nightmares the moment I see it, and I mean,
I mean, it
oh
must be based on something the writer had seen. It must be. That's not just something you think up. I mean, there's posters up, but like, why would they not? There has to be something that the writer had seen. This just can't be a made up whole cloth.
well,
I just
hopefully
don't.
he didn't actually see a nurse do what that
Oh
nurse.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. And so then there's, yeah, and then a nurse uses Pin, who I guess has a erect penis.
Mhm.
We never see
Yeah.
his genitals, but yeah, he uses her as a, or uses Pin as a sex toy, and the boy sees that, among other things that fuck him up about sex in particular. And then their mom is debilitatingly obsessive compulsive,
Yeah.
where she keeps everything under plastic and she makes them eat over areas that, and then clean immediately where they just ate. So like he has, they say later the sister decides he has paranoid schizophrenia, but I mean, it could be any number of things. He's just, he could have very advanced OCD, and that would lead to all these things. There's just so many things that could have gone wrong with him, and a lot, some of it's hereditary and some of it is just abuse.
Yeah. I mean, he's experiencing psychosis and can't seem to get a grasp on reality, but also is just projecting everything onto Pin and wants Pin to be like almost like a superhero to him. And
Yeah.
there's just like it's
And
so
Pin can't
uncomfortable.
move. Like, Pin
Yeah.
can't move on his own. There keeps like being like, "Oh my god, Pin's moving. It's finally happening." Nope. Nope, it's always there's always some reason behind Pin moving. And Pin's voice is being is all ventriloquism, which speaking of Chloe, we covered Dead of Night and how that movie ends on like the original ventriloquist horror story, with a ventriloquist's dummy becoming a separate identity and eventually switching places with the ventriloquist, and that's the end of the movie or the
Oh right.
story.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
And
totally
so
remember
I
that.
realized that, like, yeah, ventriloquism horror is its own subgenre, and that's almost always what happens.
Well, I think what weirdly how this is connected to the Chloe episode is I think you guys briefly brought up Pin, and Chloe said, "Oh, I've never seen Pin," so I just sent her
Yeah,
the movie. I'm like, "Well, you have to see Pin, of
yeah.
course you do." So it just like all ties together. But the biggest revelation, the biggest surprise for me was who is responsible for Pin's voice. Um,
Yes, and I honestly, before you even say it, it's so weird, and his voice is so processed that I did
oh
a
yeah,
lot of research to see if it was a different person.
yeah, it sounds. I mean, we know that guy's voice. It's a very distinctive, memorable voice, but it's clearly pitch shifted or
Yeah, it's so,
something.
so yeah, you can say who it is, yeah.
It's Jonathan Banks from Breaking Bad. Mike Aaron Trout, Urban
And
Trout.
and he's also in The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
He's in charge. He's like a
He's in
guard.
Beverly Hills Cop. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. He's in a lot of.
but
He plays a lot of cops.
he's got this really specific
Yeah,
voice, and Pin talks like this. And so I'm like, maybe it's a different Jonathan Banks, because that's, but I,
that's what I thought too.
every
Yeah.
single thing I read said it was him. So if it is an error, like IMDb made an error and then everybody else based their error on that, no one's ever corrected it. So I don't know. I guess it is really him. It's very strange.
Well, I mean, if he ever shows up at like a fan convention, maybe that's the one reason to go. Like, I'll just be like, okay,
Yeah.
let's confirm this once and for all.
I mean, yeah, he does Breaking Bad stuff, I think. Yeah,
I
go
would
and
think so.
take a Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai picture, have him sign that, and then ask him about
Yeah,
Pin. That's a good idea.
I think I will. But you know, yeah. Again, like I really do think the performances here again are really strong, and this David Ian Hewlett.
Mhm.
Uh, I mean,
He's in
me,
a lot. He's
Yeah,
a
I was surprised to
recognizable
find
actor.
out, but and he looks a little bit like a cross between Justin Timberlake and Robert Pattinson
Yeah, a little bit.
at this
At
point in
this point in his
time.
life, yeah, he's
Yeah,
filled
yeah, yeah,
out.
yeah. Oh, yeah, but
He's in a whole bunch of Guillermo del Toro movies. He's in Shape of Water, Nightmare Alley. He was just in he was in Rise of the Planet of the Apes. I think he was the jerk neighbor in that. But his connection, oh, he's Canadian, but his other connection to Canuxploitation is that he appears to have been friends with Vincenzo Natali.
oh, yeah, he's in Splice.
He's
That's
in
right.
Splice and Cypher and Cube, and he was in a bunch of his student films apparently, which I've never seen.
Oh, interesting. Huh.
So like he is, like I feel like
Who
Natali
knew?
is the 2000s or the lead, like in the way that Cronenberg is the 70s leader, 70s and 80s leader for Canuxploitation. I feel like Natali kind of came out for the late 90s, early 2000s. And again, it has a soap opera-ness to it, but it's less histrionic.
Right.
And when he turns on a dime, it's because he's mentally unwell. It makes more sense than when the guy in I Miss You Hugs and Kisses does.
Yeah, and I really do feel I felt so bad for the boyfriend that she gets because he's so nice and so cool, and at like one point he actually plays along and is just like, "Oh,
Yeah.
hey Pin, I see you like chocolate. Would you like some chocolate?" Like he's trying to be such a nice guy, and oh, yeah, what happens from that point is kind of inevitable, but at the same time just like, "Oh, she really been a nice guy."
Yeah, well, in a way
Let her be.
in a way I think it does sort of, I think on purpose, subvert teen drama cliches, because the boyfriend is a jock who
Yeah.
is super sweet and understanding and patient. The sister is the heroine and she is sexually active and not judged for it. And the outsider nerd is the psychopath. Which I suppose isn't, there's slasher movies with outsider nerds that kill people, but
Mhm.
they don't necessarily feel like the way that they're doing this. Like this feels like this is like an anti Revenge of the Nerds type situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. He is a very sweet guy, and it's a really interesting contrast to what you're used to that being.
Yeah, and I think that this is a movie where, even once it gets to the final act and everything, I'm not exactly sure how it's going to play out. And I mean, to me, like, I think it felt maybe just a little long. Like sometimes I
Hmm.
go, it doesn't need to be 105 minutes. It should just be 95 or
Yeah,
whatever. But still, that's probably like maybe my only critique is just because everything else kind of really rattles me. And, certain moments where like Pin kind of like is obviously he's not moving on his own, but even just in that sequence with the car and the parents, and he's like kind of moving because of the car moving and stuff, and it's just like
yeah,
it's you see him in the back seat and everything, and clearly the father's really disturbed by the fact that his son is so attached to Pin that he's like, we got to get rid of this thing. And of course what happens, they die in a car accident.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and then that just creates more codependence and intensity between brother and sister. And then the aunt shows up too, and that's also obviously what's going to happen to her, but still all that, everything that kind of plays out, I go, yeah, this just works. Everything about this movie works for me. Yeah.
And it is a really interesting variation on Psycho, with the abused child kind of taking personality stuff from the parent instead of taking the parent's personality, taking the
Yeah.
parent's pretend personality. And that Norman and his mom, like the way that the mom is embodied, but she can't move on her own because she's just a taxidermied skeleton, basically. I mean, Pin is sort of like Norma Bates.
Yeah, that's true.
He's almost like he's mummified. And there's actually part of the movie where, because Pin's always cold, Leon gives him skin and it makes him so much worse and
Oh yeah, and then he
scarier.
dresses them up in a suit
It
and they start to
looks
look
so
alike.
much creepier because he has this fake monochromatic rubbery skin. And it's like, it's great. The more you humanize Pin, the worse he looks,
And
the more
going back to
scarier he is.
going back to Deranged, another
Yeah.
uncomfortable, awkward dinner scene with
Yeah.
Pin sitting there at the dinner table, and the sister really not having it.
A
So,
couple scenes actually, and the brother
oh
or the
right,
boyfriend makes
yeah,
do with it. He does his best.
yeah,
um and They Came From Within, the book, they say that there was a push and pull between the filmmakers and the
mm,
producers, The filmmakers wanted to make a psycho thriller, but it seems like the producer Pierre David saw early footage and decided it needed to be scarier, so he forced some reshoots. And the one scene in particular is the one where Pin is in a motorized chair chasing this girl that Leon's brought home. This
Oh
very, very
yeah.
attractive and reasonably nice girl that has decided to go sleep with this obviously like disturbed individual.
Yeah.
But she was forced to be topless in that scene and didn't want to be, and it's really unnecessary. And you can tell the way the director shot it, he doesn't want her to be topless either. He's like, there's your breasts, Mr. Producer. Let's move
Yeah,
on.
of course.
But yeah, so there was some sort of, the actress's name was Helen Udy, and she was not super happy about it. But it's kind of obvious in retrospect that might be why it's too long, because they had to add some scary scenes that aren't necessarily,
Yeah,
they
that's
aren't
a good point.
necessary or the same vibe as the rest of the movie.
Yeah, it
And
could
what's
have been tightened up a
crazy,
little bit. Yeah.
what's crazy is the death toll is 3. Like, that's a spoiler, but 3 people die. The parents in a car accident and the aunt dies of a heart attack,
Hmm.
and everyone else survives.
Yeah.
Unless we're counting
Yeah, if you want to count
Leon.
Pin. Yeah.
Leon might, or yeah, Leon might
Oh
be
wait.
dead.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Right.
Uh, um,
Kind of.
Spiritually, Leon is
Yes.
dead, but still, yeah. It's and so it's not even a body count movie. It appears like one because there are attacks happening and stuff, but yeah, it's interesting. The director was also the father of the boys who started the hardcore punk band Youth Brigade.
What?
So if you're into the
Whoa.
80s California hardcore scene, you got the director of Pin to thank for those fellas.
Well, that's cool. I
Um,
love how we find these little factoids.
yeah, it was just under his I think it was IMDb factoid or something. Yeah, it's like his son's like, really? Yeah, and Cynthia Preston plays Ursula, and she kind of had a decent career after this too. Her and Hewlett were both in a movie called The Dark Side a
Oh,
year before
interesting.
this, that seems to be about a snuff ring.
Ooh. Oh.
I don't know anything else about it, but she was on the X Files, and then she was on all these Canadian shows, like the classic Canadian horror uh, show, Forever Night, the one about the cop who's a Toronto cop who's a vampire,
Oh,
but a good
okay.
guy,
Yeah.
which I used to watch on syndication after like I'd go to bed for school night. I'd go to bed at like 9:30 and watch, or 9 I guess, and watch that until 10 on my little tiny television, and then I go to sleep. And then she was also the voice for Zelda in that really no good Legend of
Oh
Zelda
man.
cartoon that would play, I think, on only Fridays. For Super Mario, it'd be Super Mario every other day of the week, and then Zelda on Fridays. I don't know, you might actually be barely too old for that show,
I don't remember, but it's
because I feel
weird.
like I was already almost getting too old to be watching that.
Yeah. Well, a movie that might be in the same spirit or the same vein as Pin is like I think the next year, The Brain,
Yeah, and
which
she's in that too.
with yeah, the one with the guy from David Gale
Yeah,
from Reanimator.
great poster slash
Yes,
VHS cover
that's a
for that
very
one.
memorable one, and I don't know if I've seen that,
And
and
I've
maybe
never watched it. I've seen the cover a million times over the years, but
you
I
know
had
me, I
never
love
watched it.
brain movies, so I mean,
Yeah,
it's got a killer
literal
brain,
literal
maybe.
brain movie.
Yeah, maybe I'll seek that out at some point. I'm curious. But no, yeah, she's great. I mean, both of them really are. I mean, that's probably one of the main reasons why you get so invested in what happens to both of them, and certainly the ending seems to imply like one thing, and of course, I kind of figured like she wasn't the type to just go like I'm gonna kill you,
Yeah, yeah.
but you know, I figured I knew what was gonna happen at the very end, but still, it's yeah, it's a consistently interesting film that I hope more people seek out. Like this is something that I would assume should get a really solid, stellar Vinegar Syndrome or
Yeah, I
Severin or
don't
one of those companies.
there has to be a rights issue, because it's been a cult film for a long
Yeah.
time, and the DVD has been out of print forever, and there's a German Blu-ray, but it was one of those companies that puts out super limited editions, so I don't know if anybody even has it. And it's one of those companies I don't know if they upscale DVDs transfers, or if they actually do. But yeah, I'm sure that all those companies, Vinegar Syndrome, Severin, Arrow, Blue Underground, etc., I'm sure they all want want it. I'm sure they're all
Yeah.
looking into it, and all the people who made it are still alive, so they and probably be open. Maybe not Terry O'Quinn, but everybody be open to interviewing about it. Maybe he'd be open to interviewing about it too.
Oh yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, it could definitely use with. It's not one that looks as awful as Rituals. Like it's DVD quality, but it's decent DVD quality.
Yeah.
It's okay. But yeah, it could do with a remaster as well.
No, for sure. No, I'm glad. I mean, I would be happy to do Canuxploitation Part 2.
Yeah,
Seriously, because I mean, but again, like I also want to tackle other subgenres, or even like I was talking about with Ozploitation, or we
yeah,
always come up with something every year that's fun, and I'm glad we did this, because I think there's several titles I can throw out, because I think one of the ones that kickstarted my interest too was basically a movie that I sort of just appeared on a podcast to talk about, where I wasn't sure if I had seen it when I was younger, and then when I watched them, I'm like, oh, I don't think I've seen this, and I kind of love it. It's a movie called Killer Party, and
Oh, by no, no, no. I'm thinking of the one by the guy who did Green Room.
oh right, no, that's a Murder Party.
Murder Party. Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry. Go on.
this is a it's a kind of, again, another surprise, a mashup, weird, sort of like supernatural slasher movie of some kind. Like it starts off at a college, and like an initiation has taken place, and all these strange things start happening that may be murders, they may be pranks. It's not like April Fool's Day, but still there's just a weird like horror comedy kind of mix together with these films. But what's interesting is that this is a director that I wouldn't mind covering at some point. William Fruitt made this movie,
Mm,
and he is also responsible for Death Weekend,
hmm.
which I love, but it's very different in tone than this. But Killer Party was just something that, like, it kind of just surprised me how it became this movie that I saw because of a podcast, and I go, oh, this is actually really kind of a fun, weird movie that I think people should seek out. And I got it confused too at the time with that. Oh crap, it's gonna bother me now. The Strange Behavior.
Oh, which is Australian, but
Yes.
really does a very good job of disguising its Australianness. I don't think there's any accents in that movie.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to that in a
Hmm.
way, but it's just, yeah, you kind of don't know what to make of it, or you can't like just immediately say, well, this is this type of horror movie, because it's kind of doing a whole bunch of different things, and then suddenly there's a musical number, or it's just, and
Hmm.
like there's a Tangerine Dream score for that one, and there's just like a lot of things once in a while where all the elements go, well, this is totally what I love, so it's all here. And that's pretty much true of Killer Party, which also has a co-starring role from the great Paul Bartel. So that's a huge reason to seek that out too.
Yeah,
But no, it's that one might also be on YouTube that people can just sort of track down. I think it eventually came out on Blu-ray. So I really do recommend both Killer Party and Death Weekend, both by the same director. So
Death Weekend is also known as The House by the Lake,
yeah,
depending on yeah, in case people are looking for it.
yeah,
Yeah,
no, those two for sure. And one that I actually was like, uh, if I could have added one more, just so I could have rewatched this, because the first time I saw it, I was like, wow, I kind of love this movie too, but I want to see it again, is Curtains. Have you seen Curtains?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Curtains is a nonsense movie. And so it's a slasher that's kind of nonsensical, and it
Maybe
makes
I
it
just
feel
like that.
what no, it makes it feel more like a giallo in a lot of ways.
Hmm. Yeah.
um yeah, the story makes no sense the hardy, but then there are these really really cool death scenes in it. Yeah, I do
Yeah.
like Curtains a lot.
Yeah. Me too.
There's
Uh,
one called DEFCON 4, which is a good I didn't want to do it because it's a sci-fi horror thing, which has the best poster. It used to freak me out as a kid. It's like a guy, and there's a crashed spaceship or satellite, and there's a guy in a moonwalk out or spacewalking out, astronaut outfit, and he's buried partially in the ground, and he has a skull for a face. And it's basically there's some people, and they're up in a version of the International Space Station, and a nuclear war happens, and they can't get back down,
mm.
and finally they crash, and they end up in this sort of Mad Max world.
Wow,
It's
that sounds
really
cool.
it's very cheap, and it's hard to call it good, but it's always one that I really like watching. It has a kind of Roger Corman feel to it.
Okay.
It's from 1985, so like right at that kind of sweet spot where apocalypse movies were at their best.
Yeah. And
And then
I
Death Ship's another pretty good movie. It's got some cool stuff going on.
hmm. Yeah, I don't think I've seen that one either. Okay. There's plenty more to explore.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we already covered we covered Black Roses on the rock heavy metal horror episode,
Oh, okay.
and we probably should have done the two that we probably should have done are Kathy's Curse, which has gained a really big following recently,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody loves Prom Night 2, Hello Mary
Oh,
Lou.
that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean that seems to have slowly, if you're not counting Bob Clark and David Cronenberg, that slowly kind of crept the charts as everyone's favorite classic Canuxploitation movie, because the
Yeah.
original Prom Night isn't great. I'm not
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm not a I like Terror Train and My Bloody Valentine, and even I like Happy Birthday to Me quite a bit
Oh, I
too,
do too. Yeah.
but I've never been a very big Prom Night fan beyond like the
Yeah, and
disco of it all.
the
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 disco part's funny.
sequels, well, at least 2 and I think
They're not even
3?
slashers really.
3 is really silly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the Howling series. It just kept on, like, somebody else got their hands on the name, and so they just did something wild with it. And
Oh,
part
and
two is
David
just
Hewlett was in Scanners too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and you and I covered Scanner Cop.
Right. Yeah,
Yep,
that's all.
which is
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, we've actually ended up covering quite a few of them on genre Grant. And the movie Bleeders, we covered on the HP Lovecraft episode. It's not great.
Mm.
I don't even know. I recommend that one, but
No, there's again, I'm excited to keep going down this journey with you and discovering other things. And every time we have a conversation, I'm always like, I learn from you, and I love that. It's like
oh,
Professor Gabe is here to impart more knowledge on you know my favorite art form. So it's a lot of
well,
fun.
thank you. Thank you for
Yeah.
saying that. Where can they find you, Jim?
Well, I decided to streamline everything and put it on Substack. I know people,
Perfect.
yeah, just that's just become all the rage, and I'm, a member of the Substack cult. So it's just directorsclub.substack.com, and maybe I'll rate things on Letterboxd once in a while, but
Mhm.
yeah, I'm trying not to do too much social media outside of like posting when I do something cool or fun, on
Mhm.
Blue Sky or whatever. But yeah, just go to directorsclub.substack.com, and eventually I'll have new episodes there, including some music related ones too. I sort of veering back and forth between what do I love more? Well, who cares? I'm just going to podcast about them both.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Because you have like what 5 different shows
Over
you've
the year, yeah, over the
yeah,
years, I've certainly done 5 different shows, but yeah, I figure like at this point, it's my RSS feed. I'll just
yeah,
post whatever I want. It doesn't have to be a Directors Club episode.
exactly. All right. Well, yeah, and as usual, you can find me on the Genre Grinder website, on Genre Grinder Facebook. I'm on Blue Sky as Gabe Powers. I'm on Instagram as Genre Grinder Gabe. I'm on Letterboxd as Gabe Powers. And I have one new shirt since the last
Ah,
time I talked about this, and I have another one that I just got a sample of that looked good, so I might add that in a couple weeks after this goes live. And all the money for the Genre Grinder Cares shirts, which is a fourth wall site that you can get to by linking at the top of the Genre Grinder page. All the profit I'm making off those is going towards charity, and I am almost up to the $100 I need to donate it. So enough people have bought them, and I get enough money from them that I just need to sell, I don't know, 3 or 4 more shirts, and I'll have $100 to donate.
well, shucks, I'm gonna get one myself.
Yeah, I
I
have
I I kind of have an obsession, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that social media keeps advertising cat shirts and movie shirts to me because they know what I am a
yeah,
sucker for. It's what really sucks about social media sometimes, but yeah, I mean, heck, my fiance just loves going to estate sales and thrift stores to buy vintage dresses. I just love collecting black t-shirts with
with
weird
shit
things
on.
on
Yeah,
them.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's my thing.
Honestly, that's one shortcoming of Fourth Wall and Printerly or Printful. I can't even remember which one it is. They don't have a lot of color options for the shirts. I would actually do more than just black, but they really only have black, white, and gray,
Oh well, that's
and
fine.
navy, I think, is the other one. But anyway, okay. Well, then until next time, keep warm, enjoy your poutine, and respect the mooses. Au revoir.